Hello, I'm Dr. Garrett Boyer. Welcome to Gospel Minded, an outreach of Benedictus Psychological Services. Interested in psychology from a Catholic Christian perspective? Check out benedictuspsych.com. Here at Gospel Minded, we spend a few minutes each week talking about the gospel reading for each Sunday, and we reflect on how this relates to our psychology. So we spend some time talking about psychology, our emotions, behavioral health. This isn't a substitute for actually going to church or participating in counseling, therapy, spiritual direction, if you do those sort of things. But like we know, things of our mind and our spirituality so often go beautifully hand in hand. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you are returning here to Gospel Minded, welcome back. Either way, I hope that you will like this video and subscribe to my channel. That way you'll never miss an episode of Gospel Minded. So here we are today in the gospel reading. It's the beginning of the Gospel of Luke. Fascinating text. Have a quick listen to this. This is Luke writing now. He says, "Since many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the events that have been fulfilled among us, just as those who were eyewitnesses from the beginning and ministers of the word have handed them down to us, I too have decided, after investigating everything accurately anew, to write it down in an orderly sequence for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may realize the certainty of the teachings you have received. Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit, and news of him spread throughout the whole region. He taught in their synagogues and was praised by all. He came to Nazareth, where he had grown up, and went, according to his custom, into the synagogue on the Sabbath day. He stood up to read and was handed a scroll of the prophet Isaiah. He unrolled the scroll and found the passage where it was written, 'The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring glad tidings to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim a year acceptable to the Lord.' Rolling up the scroll, he handed it back to the attendant and sat down, and the eyes of all in the synagogue looked intently at him. He said to them, 'Today this scripture passage is fulfilled in your hearing.'" Oh man! So here we are. Jesus enters the synagogue, reads from the prophet, and it's like this grand culmination of what we've been waiting for. So here's an interesting question that came to my mind as I'm hearing this. Look, we just finished the Christmas season, and we were talking all about the infancy narratives, and now the prophecy is foretold, and the word is made flesh in the person of Jesus. Now, this scene from Luke's gospel is years later, decades later. So, why, Lord, when you manifest yourself in the second person of the Trinity, the Word made incarnate, why now are we still continuing to wait until this moment when Jesus goes to the synagogue? It made me think like, wow, it is hard to be patient and to wait for things. And even after the prophecy was fulfilled and the word became flesh, then still we had to wait. We were waiting for Jesus to manifest himself now in this way. And it just made me think like, wow, patience is, it can be very tough to wait and to be patient. And even after we've been patient, sometimes we have to be patient some more. And that's not always such an easy thing to do. It's a good thing to do, though. There's no doubt about that. St. Paul says that one of the fruits of the Spirit is patience. He says this, the Apostle Paul is given an incomparable description of charity. Charity is patient and kind, is not jealous, is not boastful. So in charity, in love, we find patience. Patience is a way by which we express love, maybe within our own families, maybe towards ourselves. Certainly, I would think towards the Almighty. So let's spend a few minutes talking about patience and the psychological impacts of patience. So first of all, speaking from a purely psychological perspective, we can understand patience in a few different ways: positive, negative, and neutral. So when we are experiencing positive patience, it's when we are anticipating something that has a good end in it. So thinking, for example, of a young child preparing for their birthday. They're anticipating their party and their friends coming over and getting all the presents. They have to be patient and wait for their birthday to come, but that's a positive patience. There can be negative patience where we are waiting for something and we know that the outcome is probably not going to be good. Think of somebody who's waiting to hear news from a doctor and they kind of know the news isn't going to be good. Just how bad is it going to be? Or I remember when I was a kid, if my report card came in the mail and I knew mom or dad had seen it, I was waiting for them to come home. That's a negative patience. And then there can be a neutral patience. And this can be two types. There can be a mundane neutral patience. So this is when something is going to happen and it's pretty predictable, no big deal. So think of yourself like waiting for a bus or waiting for a taxi. You're patiently waiting, not so big a deal necessarily one way or another when the train pulls up or when the car comes. But then neutral patience can be very much so positive, very much so negative, waiting to find out if you got hired for a job, waiting to find out whether or not you were selected for a promotion at work. So it could be positive or negative, even when we're in that neutral state. And it's tough to be patient in all of these cases. It doesn't matter if we are 5 or 95. When we are trying to exercise patience, it is a real challenge. But here is the key, and this is where I think it's important for us to grow and foster in virtue and in Christ-like. We try to emulate our Lord in patience in this way, because it's not just a matter of waiting, it's how we behave, how we act, what we're like while we are waiting. So in life, guess what? You're going to have to be patient. And sometimes it's going to be positive, sometimes it's going to be neutral, sometimes it's going to be negative. There's no avoiding it. And again, whether you're a little kid or a big grown-up in their 80s or 90s, you're going to have to exercise patience. So while we're waiting, if we're being patient, how is it that we are acting while we're patient? How are we treating others when we're trying to exercise patience? How is it that we are thinking? What are we feeling within ourselves when we are trying to exercise patience? Because think about some of these things, whether it's positive, negative, neutral. When we don't have full control and we're being patient, waiting for some outcome, it can cause anxiety, it can cause some tension for us, it can impact our relationships with others, can impact the way we think, can lead to a downward spiral with our mood, our emotions. So how do we be patient? How do we grow in patience? I mean, there's that old maxim, patience is a virtue, so we can always strive for virtue. But strictly as a therapist here, I think there are a couple of things we can do. So one is, yes, we do have to be patient, whether we are waiting at a restaurant for our meal or whether, it's some big event like waiting to find out, where your family is going to be going, or if you're a kid going to college, where we're going to be going. Those are big things, but it doesn't matter whether it is something big or something small. When you're trying to grow in patience, you need to do your part to impact the outcome. So there are a lot of things that we don't have control over, but the things that we do have control over, we want to take advantage of that and do what is within our power to try and impact the outcome of whatever it is we're going to have to wait for. So to use this idea that I just brought up of a young person preparing for college, you may not have the ball entirely in your court about where you're going to end up, but you can do yourself a favor by studying hard, getting good grades, doing well with extracurricular activities, being involved with social and community things. Yeah, there's a lot that you do have control over in that case. So trying to impact the outcome in advance. Mentally preparing for whatever the outcome may be. Look, in the real world, sometimes things are going to go our way and sometimes they are not. And when we are being patient, having to wait for what seems like it could be an eternity, we can do ourselves a favor by thinking through what we're going to feel when we get that news, whether it's good news, whether it's not so good news, by, as it were, mentalizing the way we're going to respond, the way we're going to feel. We can prepare ourselves and really do better and be prepared to be in that moment in a more helpful and healthy way once we eventually get whatever news we have patiently waited for. And then, last but not least, just this idea that the Lord asks for patience. And a perfect example is this reading today. Here we are, right after the Christmas season. The second person of the Trinity dwells among us, and now we're still waiting for the Lord to manifest himself in his public ministry. Again, decades later. If the Lord is demanding of his apostles who are with him in the flesh all those years ago, 2,000 years ago, why are we believing that we won't have to exercise patience today? And whether you're a believer, whether you're not a believer, everybody has to be patient in this life. It's just part of the deal of being a human. So if we do these things to try and help us grow in patience, it's going to leave us a lot better as we navigate the challenges of being patient throughout the course of life. So, good stuff. I appreciate your patience with me as I talk through this topic on this week's edition of Gospel Minded. I hope you found it useful, and I hope that you'll come back next time. I'll keep you in prayer. Please keep me in prayer, and I'll see you again. I'm Dr. Garrett Boyer here at Gospel Minded. Take care.